Hey there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter, along with Sarah.
Hello!
And today we are going to do a painting of some ice skates. I have a pattern, reference photo, supply list, all of that stuff linked up in the video description. We are streaming from upstairs in my heated office, so yay! We have heat and we won't hear the furnace, so that will be great. So hopefully everything looks good. If anything is looking off, just let us know. I can bring lights closer if we're having any issues, but I think everything will be all right. If you have any questions as we go along, please type the word question in all caps. Then type your question in regular upper lower case letters like you normally would. That way YouTube won't boot you out of the system, and the moderators will see what you're asking. The moderators may help you. If they are stumped, they will. Sarah will pass the question along to me, and I'll answer it for you on air. Excuse me. And anything else?
I think that's everything.
Okay, cool. So like I mentioned, we have a pattern you can download in the video description. I just did this little kind of test piece to work out my colors and what I wanted to use for materials. You can do this all in watercolor or all in markers, whatever you like. I will be using watercolor brush pens, which are a water-soluble marker that have like a real brush tip. All these products are by Arteza. They haven't sponsored the video, but I noticed that they have a really good sale going on today, 25% off everything on their website. I have a coupon code in the video description for that. And I just thought that since that was such a good deal, and a bunch of people had asked me about these pens recently, that I'll just use a few of their things, and then if anybody was looking for supplies, it was just a inexpensive day. I don't think you should go buy stuff just because it's Black Friday, but because they were having a good deal, I thought it'd be a good day to use them. We're also using gouache, and this is their gouache, but I stick it in a little like tackle box because I don't like to squeeze out paint every time. That's honestly the reason I like watercolor more than anything else, is because the paints are ready to go. So I put my gouache in one of these containers from Harbor Freight, and the reason I chose these is because the wells, the dividers go all the way to the top, and I actually glued them in place so they wouldn't move around, because you can see pretty much any gouache will crack apart when you squeeze it out. So you want to make sure whatever you put your gouache in, if you do want to let it harden, you have it in a container where the walls go all the way up to the top. So not like a regular watercolor palette. I made that mistake before and dropped the palette and the paints went everywhere. So learn from my mistakes and use like a high-walled fish and tackle box like that, and glue your dividers down so they can't seep into one another. All right, I think that's about it. Do you have any questions yet before we start painting?
Not so far.
Okay, great. So the first thing we're going to do, I can show you my reference photo, but I recommend that you open it up on your computer screen or print it off yourself. This was from Unsplash. I thought it was really pretty and very Christmassy or wintry, so I think it'd be fun for a lot of people. I forgot to tape it up in place in front of me, so hopefully it doesn't fall down. We're going to start by using the brush markers to make some texture in the background. So I'm going to start with a dark brown. And if you have Tombow markers, you have the Zig Real Brush markers, any brand of water-based marker is going to be fine for this. You could even use a Crayola marker. Just keep in mind, pretty much any marker, probably with the exception of like the Winsor & Newton watercolor markers, isn't light fast, but since we're going to be layering it, I don't think it will be that much of an issue, but I just wanted to make you aware of that. I haven't had any issues with these fading when I've done mixed, or fading on their own. I haven't had any exposed to really strong light, but I've used them in a lot of mixed media and I haven't had any issues. But you just want to keep that aware anytime you use markers, Copics, any kind. The only light fast markers I know of are the Winsor & Newton pigment markers and watercolor markers. So I'm making some planks here. I think I'm going to have to make more than that just because this is going to make the skates look really small. And I'm doing a fairly small painting. This is on a 6" by 9" Aqua Bee 100% cotton watercolor paper. And I get the 50 packs of that on Amazon. Arteza did just release a new cotton paper, and I will be reviewing that. I don't have it yet, so when I do, I will let you guys know how it is, but I haven't tried it yet. I'm putting some knots in the wood there. And then something I like to do, because these are actual bristles, I will sometimes just kind of dry brush it on there just to give me a little texture. Now when I go in and add water, a lot of this is just going to fade away, but I will still be able to keep some of the coloring that I've added, and some of the texture will remain. So just keep that in mind. And keep that in mind if it feels too harsh to you, that some of it is going to go away. So don't worry about it.
Kendall McCauley, I got the Mission Gold paints as a birthday gift, but noticed that the raw and burnt sienna are mixed pigments. Is this typical?
Usually not. Usually those are single pigment colors. The only Mission Gold paints I have is the pure pigment set, so all of those are single pigments. But just swatch it out. Make a note of what the pigment mixes are. I imagine it might be, for the raw sienna, might be PY24 and PR101. Just kind of keep that in mind as you're working. So when you're going to paint, and you need, like, say you need another brown, you can pick one that has that same pigment in it if you want to keep everything kind of harmonious. So it's not typical, but I've seen a couple different raw sienna combinations, so I think it depends on the manufacturer. Now I'm going to grab some watercolor, and I'm just going to get this kind of a burnt sienna color here. And I want to mix up a pretty decent sized puddle on my palette so that when I go in to paint this, I can add it right over my marker and it can kind of blend and swirl a little bit. And let's grab a little bit of cobalt blue. That looks very purple to me. I'll grab this one, let's see. I wish it was a good ultramarine blue in this Arteza set. The gouache is a great ultramarine blue. I'd probably just use that. But the watercolor sets have their kind of ultramarine color is a little too violet. All right. Now you can wet the paper if you want to, but I think I'm just, since of my paint is pretty watery, I'm just going to go in and glaze over the marker layer so it doesn't blend uncontrollably. And if you're doing this on a large piece of paper, you could use a flat brush, but since I'm on a kind of a small piece, I'm using a round just so I can get around things a little bit easier. But we are using gouache as well today if you have it. So if you plan on using gouache, don't be too fussy. If it's a real pain to paint around something like the shoelace, that we have like kind of a nail there with a shoelace hanging. If that's too bothersome to paint around, don't worry about it because we are going to be using gouache. Or I will be. You can do what you like. When I'm trying to do a background around something, I try to find, like, I'll try to start somewhere and find like a stopping point. So I stop there at that edge of that strip of wood. So that way, when I start again, I can start on the other side of that strip of wood, and I'm not going to be overlapping or have any weird streaks. So try to find little areas that you can separate where your washes are going to be. If you can't, like if it's too big of an area and there's too many little spaces, if you can break it up a little bit, it makes it a little easier to get a nice smooth wash. And I taped my paper down on all four sides, and I didn't when I did this piece, and so it was buckling. This was on the Strathmore Wind Power, which is a really great paper, very economical, and it is a wood pulp paper, but I find it performs very well if you're looking for a budget paper. And this Aqua Bee paper is very inexpensive as well. Another reason I like to break it up a little bit is if I'm going to have to mix another batch of color. So that gives me a nice natural stopping and starting point for me to go to the next color so I can mix more up. And if it's not exactly perfect, it's fine because it's another piece of wood. I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving if you're celebrating, if you're in the United States. We were discussing Black Friday shopping before we started. Neither of us have done any Black Friday shopping yet.
Because I used to work retail, so Black Friday to me is one layer of hell.
I never worked retail. Well, other than my parents' hardware store, I never worked retail. So, but I've never been Black Friday shopping either.
I had a friend that worked at Best Buy.
Oh boy.
And she says she has memory of calling the police.
Oh my gosh.
Because people were getting into a fist fight over tickets on items because the tickets ran out. So this one customer was upset. She goes, it's 3:30 in the morning, and I'm in the parking lot calling the police because there's a fist fight over.
Oh my god.
I don't know, whatever it was, TV or laptop or whatever it was that was in the ad.
Wow. I don't think it gets that bad anymore. I think that things have settled down, haven't they?
Yeah, this was a while ago, but she said she'll never forget it. Moon Ram, have you painted with watercolors on rice paper?
I have. There's different types of rice paper. One rice paper I particularly enjoy is masa paper, and that is a rice paper that has a coating on one side, a fairly hard sizing on one side, and you make a little mark on the front side of it, because once you wet it, you're not going to know what's what, and you crunch it up, you crinkle it up, and then you spread it out on your board, and you paint on it, and what happens is as it dries, where you've crinkled up your paper, you crack the sizing on the paper, and then you get this beautiful little like batik look on all of the surface. So it just gives you a gorgeous texture. It's really fun. So I highly recommend that. I actually just did a painting. I'm going to share it on Instagram this weekend, I think, from the watercolor class I was taking, and our instructor had us collage on watercolor paper with rice paper and mulberry paper, and then paint over it after it dried. And that was kind of an interesting experience, because the only time I've ever added collage to watercolor was kind of as a last ditch attempt to save a painting, never on purpose. So that was a really fun technique as well. Just keep in mind that rice paper is very absorbent, so once you put the paint down, it's very likely to just kind of spread and give you feathered edges. So you want to use your paint kind of thickly, almost like a paste. And if you want to control it a little bit, and just keep in mind the colors will probably be a little darker because they're so absorbent, and the paint's not just sitting on top of the paper, it's sinking in a little bit more. But keep those things in mind and have fun with it, because it's a really fun medium to try. When I get around the foliage areas, what I'm doing is just cleaning my brush off and spreading the paint around with water so that it gets a little softer in there, because I'll be able to layer the foliage over. I just don't want to have like a big white halo around anything, so I'm just kind of softening and spreading everything in, spreading the color in a little bit. Just don't wet on top of the skates themselves. Okay. And soak up any little puddles you have. And just blot your brush on a towel, and then you can go in and soak up any extra water. Okay. Now I want to add a little more texture to the background, and I'm going to use a fan brush for this. And what you want is kind of like an old oil painting fan brush, or an old brush. And this was funny. One of I don't know if I should mention his name. Well, he left a comment, so I'm sure it's fine to mention his name. One of my viewers, Jim, he went to dry his brush, and he used his heat tool, and he's like, all the bristles curled.
I saw that.
You saw that comment? I'm like, well, don't throw it away, because that is a texture brush. Anytime you ruin a brush, you have made a fabulous texture brush. So never throw away those brushes, because they will come in so handy for texture. So what I'm doing here is I've got like a reddish brown, I've got a darker brown, it's kind of like a Van Dyke brown, and I've got a little pan of black there even. And what I'm doing is this brush is just damp, and I'm just dancing along those three pans, and it's going to pick up a variety of different colors, and then I can drag it over this slightly damp paper, and I can impart some more texture to give it that kind of weathered wood look. Since we're doing gouache, we do not have to worry about extra little stray bits of our brush landing here or there, because we can always scrub it out and cover it up if we need to. But this is such a wonderful way to add texture. Try to start off of your paper and drag it down, or if you do have to kind of get in between something, go sideways so you don't end up with like that semicircle shape. If I set a fan brush down like that, let me wet it here so you can see it. You get that kind of like half moon shape. You don't want that. You just want to start it on the tape and drag it in, or just kind of scrub it in on its side if you don't have tape to start on. That way you'll get a nice natural texture. I remember remember painting on Yupo and trying to dry it and using the heat tool and having it just kind of curl, like shrink up on me.
Like a shrinky dink?
Like a shrinky dink, yeah. Okay, that will look really cool when we take our tape off and we see that nice edge. And if you did want to like distress in any color, you could do that. I'd probably do that with gouache, and I think that would be actually really pretty. And I think it'd be pretty to do maybe like a turquoise color, just because I think that color would be unexpected and kind of fun. So I'm just cleaning my brush off, and I'm gonna look in here, grab the color that looks most like turquoise, which would be this this light blue here. It's kind of a cerulean color. Now you can mix up your colors. So if you've got a gouache color that's more like what you're looking for, but it's not quite right, you can tint it with a watercolor color. So like if I want to look here and take maybe some of that turquoise, because it's such a pretty color, I can add that to the mix, and I can add some white or whatever I need to lighten it. So these are completely intermixable. The big difference between your gouache and your watercolor is simply opacity. And your gouache will have usually some precipitated chalk or some other sort of opaque medium that doesn't alter the color, that makes it very opaque. So, but other than that, their properties are the same. They're the same binder, and you can mix them up. And I'm going to grab some white out of my big makeshift palette over here too, so I can get that a nice opaque pastel turquoise color. I'm just going to dry brush that in here and there. I just love that color. It looks like the barn was painted this beautiful turquoise, and then it's worn away over the years. Don't try to be perfect. This really should look very random. And the nice thing about the markers is if you want to go back in later and darken up some of those shadows, you can do that, and because the tips on those markers are nice and fine, you can get in there. And I have to say, my favorite Arteza products are the Real Brush pens and their gouache. I'm not 100% crazy about the watercolors. The watercolors are all right. They're the quality you'd expect for the price. I think they're priced fair, but they're not my favorite. But I love their gouache, and I love their Real Brush pens. I think those are both fantastic deals. Okay. So now the next thing I think I'm going to work on is just kind of toning the skates a little bit. So if you've gotten any color on the skates from the background, just gently brush over them with your paintbrush. And I'm talking about the white kind of upper areas of the skates. I don't know how I managed to get some pink in there. Probably with that big fan brush. I probably touched the edge of another pan of color. That's the only thing about when you're trying to decide what you want for watercolors, and you're trying to decide, do I want to get a set that's got the pans and everything laid out with a palette, or do I want to buy tubes and make my own? If you like to use large brushes, if you like to get in there with big fan brushes and large flat brushes, you may be better off. You're probably going to be better off getting tube paints and either using a ceramic dish or buying a larger palette so you can have bigger wells of paint. That way, you know, all your brushes will fit, and you'll have a little bit more versatility that way. If you rarely ever use flat or fan brushes or any big brushes like that, then the half pan set's probably going to be more affordable and compact, since you get a palette and a place to store it. You don't have to buy those things extra. I'm going to grab some of this yellow ochre color, and I'm just going to pick up a little of the background color mix just to dirty it up a little bit. And the skates are wet because I've just kind of scrubbed out any little bits of, paint and background stuff that was in there. And I'm going to add a little bit of this color around the toe and up and around the back leg part of the skates. I don't want these to be perfectly white. I do notice the Arteza watercolors don't shift that much when they dry, and their gouache hardly shifts at all. The gouache can shift a little bit darker, and their watercolors I don't find much shift at all. And the pens are pretty much what you see is what you get too. So this is kind of a nice for like if you're doing an illustrative type piece like we're doing here today. and if you look at all the color I have on this skate, I mean, your brain says, oh, it's a white ice skate, but there's a lot of color in there. Nothing is really bright white on this skate except for like the little laces holds up there. So your brain will tell you it's light. You may think, well, you're putting way too much color in there, but your brain will tell you that it's white. You don't have to worry about, you know, leaving everything white. And these are old skates, so they're going to have, they're well worn. They're going to have some color on them. I want to get a little shadow in here on the tongue. And our red will stand up on that no problem, even if we're just using watercolor, because the red color is so much more intense. In fact, I'm going to go a little bit darker back there. And a little bit on the back. Oh, that's a little too dark though. You just don't want the skates to get dark where they kind of get lost in the background. Take some of that blue color that we used before and add a little bit of that brown to it. I like to have a little bit of that gray, a little gray in there. It's like their ultramarine is a very kind of red. I don't have the original color key to tell you exactly if that's their ultramarine or not, but it definitely has a much more purpley undertone. You have any questions yet, Sarah?
Penny Cormier, what brushes are you using?
These are actually some April gave me over from A Little Bit Creative. They're Renaissance brushes. They're nice. I don't think she stocks them. She was just kind of getting them in to see, getting a few in to see if she wanted to stock them. Any good pointed round is going to be good. These are going to be hard to find. I don't think there's any United States retailers for this yet, but any round Taklon brush that has a good point is going to be fine for this project. Okay. I think I got that a little dark. I'm going to blot that a little bit. Now for the skates, because the background does feel dry enough that I can go in with the skates, I am going to grab some more of that gray. And it feels a little too purpley to me, so I'm going to grab some of this yellow ochre as well. I try to mix my grays from stuff I've already used so that everything has a harmony to it. And I'm just going to go in and give them just a light wash of that color. Blotted my brush because I had a little too much on there. And because I don't really have a lot of definition there, I'm going to grab my dark gray Real Brush pen. Now, if you're using a Tombow marker or a felt tip pen, you don't want to go over your wet paper, but if you're using a Real Brush pen, and it could be any brand, as long as it has bristles, like let me just show you what I mean in case you're not aware. See how I can spread those apart there? And you can see those bristles? So that's what I mean by a Real Brush pen. If your marker has bristles like that, then you can go over on damp paper. You can even like add water to the tip of that brush if you want a lighter color. You have a lot of versatility there. But if you did this with a Tombow marker, what would happen is that your marker would actually like suck up the moisture from your paper. And then it would be a while before you could use your marker again because the tip would look white and you'd have to wait for the ink to come back down on your pen. So you just want to do this if you have a Real Brush pen. You can just let it dry if you're using other brands and you can go in and add it later. But I wanted to get a little bit of a wet to wet here so I could show, because these skates are kind of rusty and I just wanted to get, you know, some kind of soft edge blending happening in here, so that it looks a little rough and rusty. Just be careful when you're over here detailing because you are going to be having some foliage come over, so you don't want to have any real strong lines. I mean, we'll go over with some gouache, but it's best if you don't have to correct anything like a really sharp line. And I'm just going to dab in a little bit here just to give it a little bit of a rust effect. And I'm going to go ahead and color in the heel with this color. I think ice skating has gotten popular again with kids. Probably now because there's no more roller rinks around. Do you ice skate, Sarah?
It means falling on my face multiple times. Yes. Also, it means I'm out in the cold. So no. No, I don't. No.
I think it looks like fun, but I haven't been on ice skate since I was a little kid, so...
It looks lovely to watch, and from the cozy comfort of my home with a cup of hot tea or something.
But the girls have been a few times, and I'm thinking, geez, that looks kind of like fun. I should probably go. I'm sure that's just what they want, too.
Once my feet get cold, it's all over. And my feet get cold very easily. So no ice skating for Sarah.
Yeah, I don't like to be cold at all. But I do like to skate, so... I like to roller skate, and I like to rollerblade, so I'm thinking they're probably fairly similar. I mean, I've been on ice skates when I was a kid. I'm going to add in some yellow ochre into the stippling, which means dabbing it on with the tip of my brush, just to give it a little bit more of a rusty effect. And if my brown or gray is too dark, I can stipple right over that and kind of blend it out a little bit. You can also just go in with water if I feel like anything's too dark. I wonder if we'd get more people today because it's a lot of people have the day off from work today.
We are at, let me get back up. We are at 255.
Oh, nice. Everybody, call your friends that are home from work today. Tell them they can paint. I'm going to pick up a little bit of brown off my palette too because I feel like that's a richer color. Marker colors are going to be super transparent and super thin because they're a dye. And your watercolors and your gouache are going to be richer because they're a pigment. So by alternating them, you can get kind of the best of both worlds. When you need to cut in with a really dark color or you need a really bright color, going in with the markers is going to give you that like kind of, really strong color. But then when you want a richness, going in with your paints are going to give you that richer color. Now I'm going to use a black marker here, and I'm going to get the bottoms of the sole of the boot part of the skate here, and also the inside of the heel where it'd be a little bit darker. And then I'm going to put some little streak lines there. And I'm also going to and this is with the tip of the brush, just like the razor edge of the brush. I am using a straight up and down motion. So I'm holding my brush. My brush is straight up and down to the paper like that, so it's at a 90-degree angle. So just the tip of that brush is making contact, and I am going to just graze the edge as thinly as I can. You might be able to do that better with a paintbrush. And of course, if you don't have this, if you have bottled ink, that will work just the same.
Are the Arteza pens refillable?
They're not sold as refillable pens, but you could take the end off and refill it, I'm sure. The only refillable pens that are designed to be refillable and easy to take apart because they're intended for it and that sell refill bottled ink is Color It. And I have a review on my channel if you want to check that out. They only sell 24 colors, but of course, with a pen like this, you can scribble out and mix it. And then you'd buy each bottle. Like, so if you used up a color, then you'd buy that bottle. Just because it'd be kind of pricey to buy them all at once, I think. But I would probably recommend them if you want a true refillable one, just because they're designed for that.
Shy Bean. I always find it difficult to get a realistic edge when I'm painting or even drawing something that is white. How can I get a more realistic effect?
Well, you've got to really look at the shadows because nothing is truly white. So you've got to make sure that you are getting in some of those like super pale washes of color that are there. And you might need to if you have a digital photo, pull it up and zoom in, get it as big as you can on your computer screen so you can really see what you have. I just noticed I had a gap of paper there I wanted to fill in. But I mean, white usually isn't white. And something you can do if you have a photo on your phone is or put it on your computer, boost the saturation. So whatever program you have that can boost saturation, that's going to show you what colors are really there. And you might want to make them that strong too, because it's you're the artist, you can do that. I'm putting in my laces here. And I made a mistake when I was doing the practice one. I made a mistake. If you see how the laces are coming out of the skate, that's not how they would come out. They would pull through like that. So I don't know what I was thinking when I was doing that, but I wasn't looking at my reference photo, that's for sure. So I'm going to look at my reference photo this time when I'm doing it instead of just guessing. But the funny thing is, you can make a mistake, and somebody looking at the artwork is just there. They will fill in the gaps. They will make it make sense to their own mind, which is really kind of cool. And the skates are hung from a nail, so I'm just going to go ahead and get that in there. And I actually ended up putting a bow on my skates, so I'm going to go ahead and color that in as well. So I'm just using this nice bright Christmas red marker. So it's basically like an ink. You could go in with like an alizarin crimson and just fill that in if you don't have the markers. We will layer over it for shadows and stuff. We're just getting kind of like a base layer in here. And these markers are very transparent, so any of my pencil marks, I will be able to see through these. The pencil I sketched with was I typically just use a cheap Bic mechanical pencil, and the one I used was extremely smudgy. It's one of those new, it's like 9 millimeter lead, 0.9 I guess. It's sold in the office supplies section of any store. But I noticed they had a thicker one. I thought that would be kind of fun to sketch with, but it does smudge a lot more, so you might want to choose a 0.05 or 0.07, probably a 0.05 if you have an issue with smudging. Because I had to keep cleaning up the background of this. Like I went to scan it and I had smudges all over it. And if you use different pressures on your pen, you can get thick and thin lines. So it'll be nice for the ribbon. Okay, so now that I've got those red elements, then I got to do the things up here. Once you get that, and we can start filling in the foliage, because it's not going to be as we can see what we're trying to work around at that point.
Kendall McCauley, does the texture of the watercolor paper hurt the markers?
Oh no, not at all. If it was what would happen if it was like a really textured paper? Let's see, is this paper? Well, I can this isn't very textured either, but what would happen is that it would skip. Okay, so if I go really fast on this regular cold press watercolor paper, it would just glide over the bumps. It's not going to sand them down or anything like sandpaper. So I wouldn't worry about that. I haven't had any issues. Everyone is still as pointy as it was when I got them. And I'm actually going to go in with one of these nice bright green markers. And the reference photo shows all kind of like a spruce leaves in there. And I decided I wanted to do some spruce and some pine. So for the spruce ones, I'm using this really dark, it's almost like a hunter green color. Now the artisan markers do have color names on them, but this is my first set. I actually have two sets, and one is downstairs. I like them so much I have one on my upstairs desk and one on my downstairs desk. And this is my older set because I, tend to film more downstairs, so I wanted my new set downstairs. So the older ones didn't have color names, but the new ones do. So maybe they are going to come out with refills if they took the time to put the color names on stuff. So I'm doing short little strokes for these because they are those kind of short spiky ones. I'm teaching a kissing ball workshop in a couple weeks. I'm gonna make the kissing balls for porch decorations.
Fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I gotta make mine. I've got the supplies to it, just so I won't be rusty. I haven't made them since last year.
I know, they didn't plan to. I went into Hobby Lobby week before.
Mm-hmm.
Bought all stuff to make another Christmas wreath that I don't really need, but I found this gorgeous ribbon I couldn't say no to, and so I have a Christmas wreath I'm gonna make, and I have another one that I've had just needs some freshening up, so I bought some everlasting decorations to add to my everlasting wreath.
Oh, nice. I was at AC Moore last week, and I got some just plain everlasting wreaths.
Yep.
So that I could decorate them. I made an evergreen wreath. That was really fun, but actually, since I learned how to make the kissing balls last year, I think I prefer to make those because they're just so much quicker and easier.
Yeah. I haven't done making the real wreaths before. It looks like a lot of work.
It's not bad, but I wouldn't want to do it for a living. Yeah. I have relatives that make the wreaths.
Yeah.
And they would do that every winter, and their houses smelled so nice. But
they always do.
So much work. Yeah.
I was very excited when John said we could get a real Christmas tree this year, even though technically it's the
off year because you usually do the real ones.
Share.
You do the real ones when you host Christmas. Well, that's fun. You guys gonna cut one down, or are you gonna buy one already cut?
Oh no, we'll buy one.
I'm doing some pine, and I'm just filling this in freehand. So look at your picture and say, okay, where do I need something? And that's when you wanna throw in those pine needles or the spruce, where just kind of stick them in here and there. And I am using kind of like an olive green color here. Just go with what you like. Go with your eyes. I'm working around these two kind of circle shapes are going to be pine cones, so I'm just working around those. Okay, and I do want to get those pine cones in. I'm going to do that with paint because I've got some paint that will work. You want it just to be kind of light. So I'm going to do yellow ochre and some of that reddish brown color. So we're painting in kind of the lightest shade of the pine cones because we can layer up really easy. The reference photo had more really long pine cones, but I like a rounder, fuller pine cone. I think this one's only got room for one. The one up top's only got one. But if you have room for more, put as many as you have room for. I feel like this one needs a little bit more of a point. Okay, once you get that pine cone in, you want to bring any of the foliage right up to it. It'll be nice and full. And then we can go and do some red berries. So I think the nice thing about mixed media is that you can take each, the beneficial aspects of every supply, as long as it's, as long as you're layering it up in a responsible way so it's not going to flake off your painting, and you get kind of the best of all worlds here. Oh, I drew some berries way off here, so I guess I better connect them to something. So when I say layering archivally, what I mean basically is that if I wanted to go with, like, say I wanted to use some pastel or some oil pastel or a chalk pastel or gelato or something thick and, kind of crumbly like that, I would wait till I was absolutely done, and that would go on last, because if I put oil pastel down now and then I tried to add some marker or some watercolor over it, it would just kind of bead up and roll off and it wouldn't stick. So I could do that if I wanted to do a resist, and that would work really well. But if I didn't want to do a resist, it wouldn't be a very wise option. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're working. Like, think about, is everything going to stick on top of that all right? Or is it going to want to flake off or not dry? If you have oil pastel underneath, the things on top of your oil pastel are probably not going to dry. But you can use oil pastel as that last layer, and it's going to be great. It's going to look really nice if you wanted to. Probably not on something this small, just because it would be hard to get the detail you need, but on something larger, like a larger watercolor painting. This would be pretty done really big as well, so that's another option. And I think I'll go ahead and use a marker for the stems on the berries, just to kind of make a little branch berries, because that's just going to be so easy to do that with a fine marker. Everyone's so quiet today.
People are still talking about ice skating.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Do we have a lot of ice skaters in the group?
Apparently, we've had a lot of people who used to ice skate, maybe don't anymore.
Yep.
We do have some people that still ice skate.
Oh, nice. So I just wanted to put a few dabs of color with the brown. I'll bring it up a little bit closer, just to kind of give the pine cone a little definition. We're not done with those yet, but I just wanted to get those while I had the color out. And I'm grabbing a darker red. It's kind of like a cranberry color. And I'm going to add some detail in my bow. I'm going to color the inside of the top part of the bow and then the inside of the bottom part of the bow to make it look a little three-dimensional. And I'm going to outline the center, the button. Give a little outline there. And just kind of darken where the ribbon like gets a little thinner. And then I can also, if you have, the berries are pretty small, so you might not really have too much room for this. But if you do have room, you can go and add a little shadow on the berries. Since I did this one bigger, I did have room to go in and like add a little shadow on the berries. You might not really see it if you're working small on this one, but if you have room for it, go for it. And you can do a little on some of the laces if you feel like it needs it. Now I'm going to go in with a dark gray, and I am going to, any place the lace is starting, I'm just going to do a little, kind of a little bit of a circle there. If it's easier for you to do this with a paintbrush, you can do it with a paintbrush. I think my paintbrush might be a little bit easier, but I just want to get that little hole that the laces are coming out of. Up here you have the little wraps, so you don't need to do anything on those, just maybe make little semicircles. And then around each of the laces with a lighter gray, or the small paintbrush and watercolor, just kind of draw. I'm going to bring this right up to the camera so hopefully you can see that. I'm just going around, like making the eyelet. It's just so it looks like you've got an eyelet there instead of just a hole in the leather. And you can also indicate the wraps a little bit. I mean, it's hard to see the wraps on this size painting. And now I'm going to add some of the stitching in the skate. I'm not literally drawing stitches, I'm just kind of showing where the leathers would come together. Do a little shadow. This color is nice for shadows, but I would have a damp brush handy so you can soften the color after you put it down. I don't know if it's because the real brush markers are so soft or because the ink is different. I think the ink is the same between like a Tombow and these, but I noticed like if I color in a Tombow and I go in with a damp brush, it doesn't want to blend out as much as it would with the real brush. And I just think that's because when you're working with like a Tombow marker, the bristles are firmer and they push the ink into the paper a little bit more. Now I think actually my laces should come out a little bit further, but I think I just wet that area. No, it feels dry. Okay, so I'm noticing here that either I didn't paint my background into the skate enough or I didn't make my laces come out enough, and it's going to be easier if I just alter my laces so they go a little bit further back. So I'm just going to do that. That looks really wide. Maybe I'll meet them halfway, go in a little bit of brown in the background too. Oops, I want to make sure I don't leave any markers uncapped. See if I can match that background. There we go. Mixed media is very forgiving. Okay. And I feel like I've got a little bit of ice skate blade showing through back there. So if you now just kind of examine your painting and look for any places where elements aren't touching, they're not making their way through, and just make sure you have enough connecting little, like to make that ribbon connect. If you can peek through any of the bristles, make sure you put little bits of red in there so it connects through. And now we're going to do some final details with gouache, and then we'll do final shadows, and we will be done. So this is actually a pretty easy project here. So if I'm going to be going aggressively after the gouache, I usually just kind of spritz my gouache with like a spray bottle. I'm just going to use this is a recycled drink flavor enhancer thing, and I have water in it, and I'm just squirting a little bit into the white because I'm going to use quite a bit of that. And I'm just going to gently stir it with my brush to make kind of a paste about the consistency of cream. And then I am going to add a little bit to the boots, and this is going to help them be a little more contrasted from the background, because there's actually going to be a little bit different of a texture to them. Now, this will dry a little more transparent, so you will see those colors you've put down in the skate, so don't worry about obliterating all of them. We're not using this it's not like it's straight from the tube. If you were straight from the tube, you'd have to add a little water to it. This is just going to make it so it has a little more body and stands out from the background a little bit more. You could also use Chinese white for this. Your white watercolor is going to be fine because we're not using it super thick. I'm going to add a little of this to the blades. There's not going to be a lot of highlight in there because these are pretty rusty. So if you get a little bit of, just a little glimmer of highlight, that's really all you would expect. I'm going to hopefully correct the side of my skate there a little bit where I was a little off. But that's really nice. Like if you were painting that background and you streaked some of the background color in, or you left a little too much space or something and it wasn't as smooth as you like, you really can fix a lot of that up with your gouache. Now I'm going to take that same small brush. This is a number 2 Da Vinci Nova. Any small brush that you feel like you have good control with is fine. This came in a Smart Art box last month or the month before or something. I don't think I really have, well, I guess I can do little highlights on the berries. You could use a gel pen for that too if you're, the brush seems a little unwieldy, but that just gives a little bit of sparkle. You could also add snow on any of the things if you want. I'm going to do try to do a really thin highlight on the top edge of that ribbon and the bottom edge of this ribbon.
Kendall Macaulay, is the white gouache the same as titanium white?
It's a titanium white gouache. Yes, this is the titanium white from the Arteza gouache kit. Actually, both of their whites in the Arteza kit comes with 2 whites, which is great. One's called titanium, one's just called white, but they're both titanium white pigment. So I put them together in the same container because I didn't have quite enough containers. I'm giving a little highlight to the back of this heel. You can do little slivers of highlights anywhere you like. Now I'm going to take some of this white. I'm going to mix it in with some of the pinecone color on my palette. So I've got kind of like a tan. I'm making kind of like, it looks almost like coffee with cream. And I'm going to dab some of that into my pinecone.
As I keep looking at this, I think at the very end, after you've got it all done and painted, you could just add just a dab of glitter.
Yes! Oh,
to the greenery. Yeah. I just feel like...
Oh, that would be nice. That would be nice.
Just give it a little oomph.
I think that would be lovely. Now I'm going to take some burnt sienna gouache and add that kind of in little short dabs into the pine cones.
AB, create with me. What qualities do you look for in gouache?
The great thing about gouache is that I find you don't have to get the most expensive gouache for it to be good. So basically I look for vivid colors that are opaque but not chalky. So you want something that's going to have rich, vivid color. Like if you look at this, these colors are super bright. They're super opaque, but they're not chalky. If I rub my finger on the gouache, I'm not getting like chalk on my finger. So you want that nice balance of it's going to be really bright and adhere to your paper well, and be really opaque, but it's not going to be hazy and just kind of dull looking. So that's what I look for. And unfortunately, unless you have a recommendation, it can be tough to know what's going to be good. But I find that gouache, unlike watercolor, student grade gouache does tend to be, there's less of a quality discrepancy between artist grade and student grade. I'm not sure why that is, but maybe it's because they use the same fillers, because the fillers aren't that expensive. So it's easy to replicate it. But yeah, I like this. The Arteza is a really nice one and not expensive. So that's what I've been using for the most part. I have some M. Graham gouache, and that's excellent, but it's so expensive. I only have a couple colors of that. Now I'm taking some yellow ochre gouache because it's a little more opaque, and I'm adding it into some of the pine needles, which were our lighter ones, because pine needles do get kind of that yellow tint to them, or even a rusty tint sometimes, and it will also be really opaque, and you can drag them in front of some of the spruce. And I'm going to make a little bit lighter of a color to highlight the spruce with. I'm going to take this kind of emerald green color gouache, which is kind of a nice Christmas color. And I'm going to add some warm yellow to it, kind of like a cadmium yellow to it, which is going to mute it a little bit, but also make it more opaque and make it lighter. If I added lemon to it, it would be like a lime color. I don't really want a lime color. And I'm just going to do little tiny, I got that too running that a little bit thicker. I'm just going to do little tiny flicks. I'll add a little bit of white to that too to make it a little bit thicker. The thing, if you let your gouache dry in a palette like this, you're just going to make sure, especially before you go to a white, you clean your brush off really well, so you don't end up contaminating your whole like tube of gouache because you've squirted it out already. And again, because and I probably could use a smaller brush for this, but because I am just trying to add a little fullness and highlight, but I want to keep really light lines, really thin lines, I'm using my brush at a 90-degree angle with my board here, with my paper. Okay. I'm going to go in with my dark brown. Actually, no, I'm going to go in with my black. I'm going to go in.
Write it down. She said she's using black, people. Write it down.
I'm going to do the creases between the boards here. Like any holes that are in between the boards that we have in the background. I did use black on the sole of the shoe too, so it's good to use it a few times. You can go through any place you think you need a little bit more definition, you can add it, because you want to use the full value range. I mean, that doesn't mean you have to use black. You can mix a very dark color and use it. Okay, I think that's all I need of that.
Moonram, would you say the Neocolor 2 are more gouache-like than watercolors?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, that would be, you could totally use that. You could like scribble some or sharpen, like use some shavings. Or you could just color on there and spread it around with a brush. It might be hard to get a really fine line. And let's see, I feel like I need a little more background color in there. So since I still have plenty on my palette, I'm going to go fill in a little bit. I think I might have sketched a little bit more foliage in there, but didn't end up actually wanting to put it in. So just go in, and if you make it a little bit darker, it'll look like it's shadowed, so that'll be totally fine. Blotting my brush so I can remove the excess, and then just soaking up. If it looks like it's too dark, I'll just go in and kind of go in with a dry brush and soak up some of the extra. You could always use colored pencil if you needed to get some really fine details. I do want a little shadow behind this ice skates, so I'm going to mix up a color. And now remember when we did our when we did our streaking in the back, we let our brush go in any of these 3 pans. We let our fan brush go there. So I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of the fact that I've used this black already, because as long as we use it intentionally, it's fine. I'm going to take these 3 colors and mix them together so I have a nice dark color. And we've used all these colors before because we used it with a fan brush. And that's going to give me a really nice shadow color. So what I'm going to do is apply it in these areas that will be the darkest. And that will be like what is just about touching the skates. And that's going to give us a nice contrast, so they stand out a little bit more too, because they're white, remember? And even though we didn't leave them white of the paper, we added shadows and tones and stuff, we still want to have them seem to be white. I'm adding the shadow of the ribbon. I'm going to let the shadow of the ribbon jump away from the ribbon a little bit, so it looks like it's kind of floating in the breeze. This can help define. So what I like to do is put the shadow where I want it with the brush, and then rinse and blot my brush and drag it. Or you can just have a clean damp brush in your other hand and just bring it over as you need to. But this is going to help it pop away from the background. So if you were interested in any of these products, and you needed them, not just, I don't want to encourage anyone to just go impulse buy, but there's a coupon code for 25% off, and their products are very inexpensive as far as comparable art supplies go. So it is a pretty good sale, but you need the coupon code to get the discount. Now I think I'll let this blade shadow kind of come away from it a little bit, so it looks like it's kind of out away from the wall a little bit, just on the end. And if you feel like it's streaky, just kind of streak it down, and then it will go with the pattern, the wood grain. And if it doesn't look right, just go over it with water again, because earth tones tend to be very liftable. Mixing up a little bit more of those same 3 colors. And we're getting kind of like a soft all-around shadow, just because it's a very evenly lit, almost like a still life. There's not a strong light source on this. And you'll see that a lot with professional still life photography. And this is from Unsplash, which is a resource that anybody can use. The photos for commercial use, photographers generously upload their work to get a little more promotion. I'm letting this ribbon shadow kind of skip away from the ribbon a little bit, just so it gives it a little bit of depth. I'll darken this area in here.
Moonram, do the lighter colors dry darker and darker colors dry lighter when using gouache?
Generally, they all dry a little bit darker. They shift us slightly darker, so it's the opposite of watercolor. But I mean, because the colors are opaque, If it's a super, like if it's a black, it's going to look more like a velvety black instead of like an oily black. So maybe that's, I mean, that I guess could appear to be a little bit lighter. But I find most of them will tend to shift a little bit darker, kind of like an acrylic paint. Okay, I don't want too much up here because you really wouldn't have too much shadow above it, but you can have a little bit. Pull it away from the background a little bit. Super gentle with that shadow, and just use that shadow as a tool to give you a nice crisp edge. And it's watery. The shadow on top of the skate is watery, and you're just kind of pulling it away and letting it fade out. All right, now we get to remove the tape and see how it looks. I'm just going to give it a quick blast so I don't, for two reasons, so I don't smudge my paint, and also because if you're using masking tape and it's not like the painter's tape that is, super low tack, by heating it, it will make it release a little easier, so you have less chance of ripping your paper. All right. And if you guys have any questions that you want me to answer, make sure you get them in there because we're just about done. I'm just going to wrestle with tape for a minute here. And I always fold my tape back on itself when I peel it off so that it will be less likely to rip the paper as well. Love the white border. A really pretty Christmas card too, I think. We did a few over the last few years that would make nice Christmas cards. I think this would totally be a good one. Ooh, and there we have it. A lovely Christmas scene. I'll move this out of the way so you can see the practice one right next to it. I do not have very much space in my upstairs table here. Oh, for all you Star Wars fans, my son got this mug with Coco like a couple of years ago, and I totally snagged it. I don't know if you can tell, it's because it's so dark, but it's Darth Vader. I stole it from my pens, and I store them tipped down in a cup so that the ink is always ready to go. It's not a liquid. There's like a sponge in there, kind of like a regular marker, so it's not loose ink like a water brush or anything. So it's not just all going to drip out. Like you wouldn't want to do that with your Jaden Davenport mermaid markers because all that ink would slide out. But with these, you can store them tipped down, and that's how I store them. And they work great. Any last minute questions before we go?
Moon Ram, do opaque watercolors behave the same as gouache?
Well, if it's listed as a watercolor and on its characteristics it says opaque, it's not going to be as opaque as a gouache. A gouache is like super opaque and matte, and an opaque watercolor would still be a little glossier because of the gum arabic content. It would still be more transparent than like if you had a yellow ochre gouache and a yellow ochre watercolor, that yellow ochre watercolor in its pan is going to look glossier, and when you paint it, it's not going to be as opaque as a gouache would be, very matte and opaque.
Okay, we're caught up.
All right, well, thank you guys so much for tuning in on this Black Friday. I know you probably have lots of deals to go and find, but I appreciate you spending some of your time with us today. You have anything to add before?
No, I don't.
Okay, great. Please give me a thumbs up before you go. That really helps my channel. And everything is listed down below: the pattern, the reference photo, the supplies, all that extra information you will need. And that's all I have. So have a great weekend, everyone. Until next time, happy crafting.